Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming, taking some time out of your busy life to give us a hand. I'd like to call a meeting of the Design Review Committee to order. First order on the agenda is the declaration of conflict of interest. Do anybody present that will be voting that has a conflict of interest? Seeing none, we move on to the approval of the agenda for today, of course, Tuesday, June the 15th. As everybody has a chance to review this, any issues or concerns? Hearing none, do I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Moved by Ken McGinnis, seconded by Chris Fournier, that the agenda for today's meeting be adopted as presented. Any discussion or whatever? Having not seen none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. 1, 2, 3, I guess it's 6-0. Fourth item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. Minutes of the design review meeting on Monday, April the 19th. Have you had time to review those? I assume you have. Do I have a mover and a seconder for these minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Yankoff. Seconded by Sharon Larder, that the minutes of the Design Review Committee meeting of April 19th be adopted as presented. All those in favor? Aye. All those against? Motion carried, 6-0. A business arising from the minutes? Any business from back in April? No. Hearing none. Turning now to reports. First up, Emily. 203 Fitzroy Street, PID 346486. Floor is yours, Emily.
All right, good afternoon, folks. It's my first time presenting to some of you, so good to meet you. I'm Emily Trainer. I'm a newer planner on the block here, and today I'm presenting before you guys 203 Fitzroy Street, a request from the applicant, 9 Yard Studio, that was submitted for Design Review Board to accept the exterior design proposal. And the owner of this property is the Canadian Mental Health Association, and the exterior design relates to a proposed new 20-unit modular residential building with ground floor office space. And as required by the zoning bylaw, the design review process applies to this application because there are proposed affordable housing units, and it's a multi-residential dwelling type in the 500 lot area. Sorry, just to mention, this is the rendered view of the building that was submitted by the applicant, 9 Yards. And here is the concept site plan that they submitted. So you can see here the ground floor office space on the east portion of the ground floor. On the west portion, the residential units. They have their rear parking. There's substantial landscape green space that's proposed and driveway access along the west portion of the building. Here are some building material details that were submitted by the applicant. So you can see there's a mix of steel siding being proposed with wood siding, pre-finished wood siding being Cape Cod or equivalent. Here just some context for you folks about the subject property. So it's zoned downtown mixed-use neighborhood. It's located within the boundary of the 500 lot area. You have Weymouth Street to the east, Houston to the north, Hillsborough Street to the east there, and of course it's on the north side of Fitzroy Street. It's a large lot. It's a little over half an acre with significant street frontage. So it's about 144 feet of street frontage and a depth of about 200 feet as well, and it's currently vacant. In terms of the surrounding neighborhood, you folks probably know it well, so it's a mix of commercial and multi-residential uses. It kind of has a low to medium density character. In terms of zoning, all properties to the north, east, and west are also zoned downtown mixed-use neighborhood, similar to the subject property. And then to the south, on the south side of Fitzroy Street, they're zoned DN, so downtown neighborhood. And just to give some context too on how we will look at this application once it gets to the building and development permit stage. And we're looking at zoning conformity or conformity with the zoning and development bylaw. The proposed use is the modular apartment building type with ground floor office use. This is permitted in the zoning that applies, the DMUN zone. The applicant has confirmed, and they are here today if you want to bounce any questions off them. They've confirmed that the apartment units do meet the affordable housing definition set out in the zoning bylaw, and that the proposed height does meet the minimum and maximum requirements for the lot set out in the DMUN zone. In terms of parking, we would apply the 500 lot area parking rate. So that requires 1 space for every 2 units. They're proposing 20 units, so that's about 10 standard parking spaces that would be required. The applicant has yet to submit a detailed site plan or elevations, so we can't confirm conformity with the zoning bylaw at this time. But again, we will be looking at this closely during the building and development permit stage. As of right now, based on our first review and what the applicant has submitted, it appears that the proposal for the exterior design meets the general intent and purpose of Section 7, so the design standards for the 500 lot area. And just to note too, beyond Section 7 of the zoning bylaw, there are other kind of design orientated regulations that we would look at in the review of this application, like the height of the mechanical penthouse. It's got to meet the requirements there, and stepping from the roof of the mechanical penthouse, we'll be looking at that. There's requirements around the orientation of front doors and windows relative to the street. There's requirements in terms of landscaping along the frontage of the building relative to the street. And there's land use buffer requirements. When you have a residential parking lot that relates to more than 4 apartment dwelling units, and there's abutting residential properties, there's a land use buffer requirement, so either an OPEC fence or landscaping with a certain height and width around the parking lot. So now to get to the design review portion. So the design reviewer was Robert Matthews, who you folks know as the appointed member of the city's design review roster. This kind of summarizes the key feedback from Mr. Matthews. So he touched on the front yard setback, that it aligns with that of adjacent buildings in this area, that the height as proposed is appropriate relative to the scale of buildings on adjacent lots. He touched on the opportunity for landscaping that exists in this area between the building, the rear of the building, and the parking lot in the rear too. There's a lot of green space there. So he touched on the opportunity for hard and soft landscaping. And then outdoor amenity space for tenants as well within that area. He suggested revisions to the entrances to the building. He talked about the need for barrier-free rear entrance to the residential units from the parking lot. He talks about the need for increased buffer area between the driveway access and the residential main entrance, which is currently proposed on the west building facade. He talks about the need for greater definition and weather protection around the residential main entrance. So he gave the example of canopies being incorporated into the design. And then he talked about the need to address the grade change, specifically the residential lobby and stair design as it is right now. He wanted that to be addressed a little bit in terms of the grade that's being proposed. He suggested that the facade color be timeless, and that he wanted more details about garbage and snow storage as well. So we had forwarded these comments from the design reviewer on to the applicant. Again, the applicant is here today, and they can speak to their intended response probably a little bit more, but they did indicate that they're looking to introduce design features like landscaping. They're working with a landscape company at the moment to get that better defined. They're looking to introduce outdoor amenity area where he suggests between the rear of the building and the parking lot. They are looking to incorporate canopies over 3 of the 4 building entrances, and they agree with his recommendation that there should be more of a buffer between the driveway access and the residential main entrance as well for safety reasons. Finally, where are we? Sorry. They're looking to define grading, accessibility, and ramp details a little bit more, going into the building and development permit stage. They did touch on the residential entrance. They have a limited ability to modify that because of the modular nature of this building. I think there are some design limitations associated with that, and again, maybe they can speak to that a little bit more. They did talk about the proposed building material being fixed, but in terms of color palette, they haven't defined that yet. And they talked about the snow and garbage that they're proposing to allocate that in the unoccupied space in the rear. There's quite a bit of space there. So based on these details, our office is recommending that the design review board accept the proposed exterior design with the condition that it be revised to reflect those comments from Mr. Matthew, his recommendations. So that kind of concludes my presentation. If you folks have questions or comments.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. Any questions for Emily?
Could you tell me in relation to, where is it? Is there any buildings we would know that?
Yeah, it's next door to the Hells Angels Club.
Yeah,
Picture.
okay, that's what I was thinking.
You know where it is now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
The little
Sorry.
red building, yeah, it's on this, right here. There's also kind of a newly renovated multi-residential building just kind of southeast,
That's right.
up on the south side of,
Yeah. They just did a lot of work on it.
yeah,
It was the old New Methods cleaner.
okay, yeah.
Okay, Brian?
I just, one simple question on the site plan. I know there's parking inside the building, but I don't see any driveway leading up to. Is that just an incomplete site plan?
So my understanding is that they're not proposing, parking within the building itself. It's just surface exterior parking that's being proposed right
So
now.
that's office space that's,
Yeah, so on the main
Okay.
level, they have the office space as well, like a split between office and residential units. And I believe on the basement level, it's storage space that they're proposing. It kind of might have the appearance of parking stalls, but it is storage space by the looks of it down there.
Okay.
And as of right now, they're more than exceeding the parking requirement in terms of surface parking on the back, yeah.
Thank you. Do we want to, before I go further, I got a note here from Ellen that there's a meeting here at 1 o'clock in this room. So we have 3 applications after this left, and we have 30 minutes left. So we got kind of an allotment of 10 minutes per applicant, so I don't know what that means. I don't know how much detail there are in the following 3, but anyway, we'll deal with that as it comes along. Do we want the applicants in here to speak, or?
I think there's been a very thorough presentation with ample detail, and I'm willing to propose,
Okay.
moving it to vote.
Okay, all right. Anybody not happy with that, or?
Mr.
Anything?
Chair,
Yes,
this is my backyard where I grew up.
Yes.
And this was the old Colin and William Mills property. Prior to that, it was a car dealership. and it's been a vacant lot for how many years? 10, 15 years. Infill development, more than welcome.
Where are you gonna park all those big trucks of yours though? Phil?
They're across the street.
Yeah.
In the
But
park.
it's a great development for the downtown.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll move.
It's been moved by Ken McGinnis, second by Brian Gillis, that the application for 203 Fitzroy Street be recommended to council for approval. Or when it's an approval, does it go to council?
This just goes back to staff.
Just back to staff, okay.
There's a disagreement between the two, we go to council, but it just
Therefore,
goes back to staff.
it's a decision rather than a recommendation. Be approved.
Question.
Question? All those in favor? All those opposed? Opposed? No. Favor 6-0. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you.
Great job.
Moving on to our second application, 62 Dorchester Street, Laurel.
Everybody,
The
I'll
mic is
be
yours.
brief. This has been before the board a number of times over the years. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. So this is the property. It's two properties that were consolidated at 60 to 66 Dorchester Street. This project has gone through design review and has had some revisions over the years from 2014 on to now. This is the current proposal the developer is proposing. This was the original proposal in 2014. This went through design review. It was accepted. You'll see that the original had wood cladding. There was the use of glass along the balconies. There were these kind of interesting trellises that were incorporated into the design at the time, and the garages were at street level and setback. So one of the main things I want to point out is the upper level was set back on the original design. And so there was like a step back on the third level. So you've got 4 units and your upper level on the third story was stepped back from the streetscape to hide that third story. In 2019, the project was sold and a new developer came in and proposed this design. So this kind of varied quite a bit from the original design. This particular design, they had the wooden trellises. You'll see that there was no step back, so this main facade went from the ground floor to the top of the roof. It was comprised mainly of brick and dark wood. When the developer went to build, there was problems with occupational health and safety because of the location of the power lines. So when you got up to the third story, the construction of this third story proposed a bit of a hazard because of the location of the power lines. So Maritime Electric and Occupational Health and Safety wouldn't let the project proceed as it stood with this approved design. So the developer came back and they proposed this design. So you'll see that the upper level again is stepped back. These wood pieces here, which were reminiscent of the original design that was approved in 2014 by the design reviewer. This staff feels that this actual new design is more reflective of what was originally proposed and is more in keeping with the original proposal than the second proposal that I had just shown with the brick and the wood with the full 3 stories. So the reason why this is before the board is we're looking for acceptance from the board, whether they feel that this is acceptable and if it's more in line with the 2014 proposal. If it is, then we will proceed with issuing a permit for it. But the bylaw does, there are 3 options that the board has. One is to accept the drawings as submitted. You can suggest minor modifications, or if the board feels construction drawings are substantially different from the design review submission, the board can suggest that staff resubmit the design back to an independent design reviewer. Overall, staff feels that This new design is more in keeping with the 2014 design, and we are comfortable with this upper level being stepped back as originally proposed. So we are recommending for the board to accept this design.
Thank you, Lowell. Any discussion, folks? Concerns, suggestions, issues? Hearing none, do I have a mover of a resolution? Moved by Mayor Brown, seconded by Brian Gillis, that the application of 62 Dorchester Street before the Design Review Board be approved. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion's carried 6-0. Thank you very much, folks. Moving on to 199 Grafton Street. Laurel on the mat again.
Will accept myself as conflict.
Okay, thank you, Laurel.
So we had a design review proposal, I believe it was last month, for this overall property.
Yes.
Apartment building. This is back because they're proposing to do revisions to the facade of the original polyclinic building. APM Commercial, on behalf of their client, 102390 PEI Inc., they're proposing design revisions to the front facade of the polyclinic, and the changes to the current, to the drawings, or to the building is, actually I should show you. So this is the original polyclinic building. Here's more of a look along the streetscape. You can see this atrium here. It's just at the top of this sort of portico where you walk into the building, and then the main face of the building is all brick with windows. There's currently no interaction along the streetscape for exterior doors or anything. So what they're proposing to the building is this. So the changes would include changes to the current entranceway, removal of basement level and first-story windows on the east wing, replacing with storefront glazing and a separate entranceway for a new retail tenant, right along here. Addition of wooden timbers to frame the entranceway, a new storefront, and extension of the glass atrium over the entranceway to the ground level. So you can see originally the atrium was up here, and they're bringing it right down to the ground level, and including these new wooden timbers to add a storefront and a new portico. So section 3.14 of the bylaw states that the development officer and design review board shall review development and/or building permit applications for alterations and additions to existing buildings for compliance with design standards for this 500 lot area, and shall give further consideration for the following. So I included within the report all the criteria for reviewing renovations to buildings within the 500 lot area. So I'm sure you guys had a chance to look at that over the weekend. But the 500 lot area, section 7 also stipulates various design criteria for buildings within the 500 lot area. And this is to ensure that there's high quality design within the 500 lot area. The staff reviewed this, and the current building, we feel, the facade is reminiscent of architecture from the 1970s. Apart from the existing entrance to the building, there's very little interaction between the current building facade and streetscape. So I'll just pop back to the original. So you can see it's just kind of all along this end, it's just basically trees, lawn, and windows, and then down at this end is where the main amount of the exterior renovations will take place. So it's covered up right now by trees, and there's quite a few smaller windows. You can kind of get a peek here. So it's just basically all these windows down to the ground floor, and then there's a basement level. This is where they plan to open up the building more and create the storefronts. So it's staff's opinion that the current proposal incorporates traditional materials such as wood timbers. The addition of storefront glazing and additional entrances along the front of the building creates more interaction between the streetscape and pedestrians. The wooden timbers and the storefront glass also helps to break up the current plain facade of the building. So we feel that what the developer is proposing is more in keeping with the requirements of section 7.12 storefronts in the zoning and development bylaw, and that's under the 500 lot area design standards. So staff are advancing it to the design review board to confirm and get acceptance from the board, again, that the proposed facade renovations to the building is in keeping with the 500 lot area standards. So the board also, again, has the option to accept the drawings as submitted, suggest minor modifications, or if the board feels that the proposal doesn't meet the criteria set out in section 3.14.4 and section 7, they can also recommend for the project to go back to the design reviewer.
Thank you, Laurel. Discussion, anyone?
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Kane Arsenault, on behalf of the
Yeah.
developers in the next room, if
Okay.
you need him. just-
Who's there?
Sure. Kane
If
Arsenault.
you need to,
you like to-
have some questions clarified by the developer, he's available.
Sure. Any questions for Mr. Arsenault if he was to come in? Everybody seems satisfied with the
It's pretty
presentation?
straightforward.
Yeah, okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it. Mike?
Moved by Councillor, by Ken McGinnis, seconded by Councillor Yankoff, that the application regarding 199 Grafton Street be approved. Further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. Thank you very much, folks. Robert, you're away. We are.
So, good afternoon, Design Review Board. So today I will be speaking to a vacant lot located on Sherwood Road. This is in between the current Maritime Electric hydro generation station, which is to the west, and then to the east is a truck depot. Anyway, so just to proceed forward, the request is to approve the exterior building design of 2 new 4-story 35-unit residential apartment buildings. I will state that originally the applicant was stating that there'd be 10% of all units in this development would be dedicated to affordable housing. Through conversations with the applicant, that's revised. It's not going to be affordable housing as the department or as the zoning bylaw currently defines it, which means it has to be provincially subsidized. Rather the proponents is going to be accessing CMHC funding through their low interest loan construction grant program. So as the bylaw defines, we state affordable housing is related to provincially subsidized units. This is through CMHC. So this kind of almost precludes the requirement for design review, because that's what would trigger this to go through design review. Because any development that's located outside a 500 lot area, it applies to affordable housing developments. But I will also state that the applicants proceeded and was granted approval through a rezoning process to rezone it from industrial to commercial. And so part of that entailed a development agreement which stipulated design review approval. So just please bear that in mind. So this is the concept design. The applicants have also changed the proposal from their initial rezoning application. They decreased it quite a bit from 3 buildings to 2 buildings, and from around 200 units to 35 units a piece, so 70 units in total. Now this is going to be related to phase 1 of the proposed project. So they're basically stating phase 1 will be these 2 buildings with the on-site surface parking, as well as the amenity space here. This is the Maritime Electric Generation Station. And then phase 2, which would have another building, would come at a later date once these are constructed. So the applicant submitted building materials and the design of both buildings, what they're proposing. They are proposing that the design of both buildings are going to mimic each other, so remain the same. So we do have some, just I'll quickly go over, we do have some vinyl siding, so the blue and the beige is vinyl siding, and then they have kind of some stone culture along the base here with the covered entrance. So that kind of gives the indication of the site. So that's Seafood Express, this is the subject property, that's the Maritime Electric Station, And then there's also, for the board's information, there's existing apartments that have gone up and are currently being constructed just behind the subject site there. So these are just some elevation renderings of the site and the proposed buildings. As you can see here, the amenity space located on the east side consists of various things such as a fenced-in park for dogs, as well as gazebo and some play equipment for the residents and their children. So as you can see here. And then with garbage located in the center. So the design reviewer was Robert Matthews. He proposed a number of changes. I'll just quickly go over them. He wanted a more detailed site plan that would distinguish between hard and soft landscaping. He was also proposing changes to break up the massing of the building by going more with vertical sidings rather than horizontal. He also recommended to relook at the building entrances, again, to incorporate some main vertical elements to distinguish the entrances. And then he was also referring to distinguishing maybe the two apartment buildings so that they weren't mimicking each other. And then he made a comment in regards to possible relocation of the garbage bins from the center of the surface parking to maybe somewhere more screened. But I will state that the applicant has proposed to, and it is a requirement in the bylaw that any garbage area is definitely screened with opaque fencing. So the applicant was sent the design reviewer's comments. They came back with the following responses. They will present a more detailed landscaping plan to distinguish the amenity area as well as the soft and hard landscaping features. They agreed that they would look at extending the sidewalk from the buildings to the street entrance. This is one of the requirements, and some of the discussion that council actually had was providing some sort of hardline connection, extending the sidewalk out to possibly Sherwood Road. Now they're proposing that they would construct that at a later phase when the active transportation route goes down Sherwood Road and connect and leading up to that. He was also referring, they also were responding to the massing. They agreed that they can provide more vertical style massing in regards to the vinyl siding to break up the mass and the bulk of the two structures, and revisit the entrance to incorporate more vertical elements to distinguish the entrances more. The only thing that they did state that they wanted design review and I believe staff to reconsider was the fifth condition, and that was pertaining to the two buildings mimicking each other. They stated for cost reasons they wanted to keep the buildings the same and focus on the design from that perspective. They did provide a list of applications and current developments that are currently under construction and have been approved in the past, where you have multiple buildings incorporating the exact same design. So they have provided sufficient examples of that, and staff is well aware of that. So barring that, our recommendation is to accept the exterior design with the conditions of the design reviewer. Say we accept condition 5. We do realize that there are multiple situations where buildings will mimic each other from a design perspective, and so considering this is even outside of the 500 lot area, and this is an added condition that they have to go through via the development agreement, that we're prepared to perhaps waive that condition. So I can take any questions, and I believe the applicant is here to take any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions of Robert, folks? None? Would you like to talk to the...
So you may want to hear from Mr. Morrison just to clarify that what Mr. Zilke alluded to in regard to that's condition 5 from Mr. Matthews.
Okay.
The concern is on this one, depending on the funding, it may preclude the need for this approval, because if it doesn't end up meeting certain affordable housing requirements. Is that not correct, Bob?
That is correct. There is a development agreement, though, that is has the requirement for a design review on the building. So when council approved the rezoning and the official plan redesignation to change it from industrial to commercial, there was a stipulation in the development agreement by way of contract that does require the proposal go through the design review process and is approved through that. So there is, I guess, some leverage there, some mechanism through the contract to necessitate some of these proposed changes.
So do we still require, Mr. Morrison?
No, and, again, that's at the request of the board.
Yeah.
But he's available as well if you were
Okay.
concerned about that component of it, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, this is not related to the design review, but again, originally this started out as a affordable housing initiative, and now it's changing because we're looking at amending our affordable and accessible housing program, correct?
So just to provide clarification to that, Your Worship, we had, in the zoning bylaw since 2018, we have defined affordable housing as provincially subsidized. Currently, I believe the Affordable Housing Incentive Program offered by the corporation, which is regarding the municipal tax increment financing or tax abatement program, is being, I guess, reviewed for the definition or
That's
defining
what-
affordable housing, correct?
But also the definition of affordable housing, does it fall under CMHC or the funding through the province?
Yeah,
And
so-
we're looking at just going with the province.
Yes, so according to the zoning development bylaw, we define it strictly as provincially subsidized units. And we require a contract between PI Housing Corporation and the applicant and slash owner.
So, my understanding, now this won't be non-market value housing, it will be just market value, correct?
Well, Mr. Chair, it doesn't preclude them from still getting the CMHC housing. It's just that they don't get all of the benefits.
Benefits under it.
Benefits, and both in the incentives that were provided, as well as some zoning bylaw incentives in waiving of permits, if it's not funded by the provincial government.
Yeah.
But it could still be a CMHC funded project. It's still affordable housing. It's just that it doesn't get the additional
other.
perks that
From
came
the
with
city.
that.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you, thank you for that
Okay.
clarification.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So, do you want Mr. Morrison to come in and speak, or are you okay?
Fine with,
I'd say you're okay? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I will.
Moved by Brian Gillis, second by Ken McGinnis, that the application on Sherwood Road as presented, lot 18-2 Sherwood Road, be approved. Any further discussion?
Question?
Question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion's carried 5-0. Thank you very much. Made it with 6 minutes to spare.
Wow.
There we go. Thank you very much for coming. Do I have the introduction of new business? We don't have any. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Mayor Brown, seconded by Chris Fournier, that we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
And folks, just